Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. Hope you're having a fantastic Monday. It's SoulSaint here, and we just got finished with the Fire Night Castles event that had the Triple X Savage event that went on. It was very, very good for personally me, and I heard a couple other people got some good pieces. But if you didn't, then I guess it's a little unfortunate, but you might also have some really, really good gear, so you're trying to replace the best of the best as it is, right? I wanted to get this video out to you guys sooner during that event so that you had something to work with, but unfortunately I was trying to optimize and fix some kinks on some of the issues I was facing with my stage 10 team, but I did want to give you guys at least a stage 6 option in case you're ever interested in pushing into one of the hardest dungeons of the game that's currently out right now. And with that being said, my approach is somewhat different, but also kind of very close to some other options you would have. And it incorporates utilizing freeze, which is going to be very, very important with controlling the Fire Knight when you get around to it, but also the waves themselves. I will go ahead and give you a disclaimer now. This isn't one of the fastest teams in the game. However, I was looking for consistency, and the main thing is that I was able to effectively farm this on a regular basis to improve my quality of gear that I was getting when it came to the type of pieces I was looking for, whether that was regen or savage, particularly during this last event, right? Now, I have two variations to this team, and they both work very, very well, but they are going to be pretty demanding. One of the things I will say is that, in particular, the gear requirements when it comes to approaching hard are a little bit more towards the late/end game. So if you are not able to hit these speeds as well as being able to facilitate maybe having some of these champions built, it's understandable. This is a very, very specific type of style of fight that requires a little bit of a attention to detail kind of deal. But the concept is going to go as this. We have 2 ally attackers with 3 freezers, and the freezers that we have of our choice today are going to be your Carl, Creodin, and Newt. With our ally attackers, Lanathra and Farakin. Now, why do I have these champions? Well, one, Farakin for me is actually kind of important because of the fact that he provides decreased defense, which ultimately improves the output of your damage, which means that your efficiency at killing things faster or, you know, taking care of the boss faster is a lot more important. In addition to that, you know, his ally tech is pretty much key. That's pretty much the most important part about it. Lanathra was actually just here primarily just for his ally attack, which is his finest hour ability, the A3. Although I will say this, Flicker Barrier, although I don't have it fully booked, and you're going to notice some of that being the case with some of this team, actually had a little bit of a blessing for our team in the event of that, like, worst case scenario for RNG, and some other elements play a part into maybe losing a little bit of efficiency, because you always have to deal with the 3% resist, as well as you'll see, one of my freezes, your Carl, he's not fully booked up, so his ability to maintain freezes are a little bit less likelier compared to maybe someone who is a little bit more developed, like, for example, my Creodin, who is easier to book, right? Going forward, though, I will say your Carl, the main reason why I have him in this team comp is not only because he provides freezes, which is going to be important, right? But also the decreased speed, and in addition to that, the ability just to do more damage to targets that are frozen. So these are champions that are benefiting from a freezing standpoint, as well as they are giving freezes in general, which is going to be key for fighting Fire Knight, hard in particular. Creodin, on the other hand, while he also provides his freezes too as well, and he's probably going to be the one who's going to shine a little bit more in terms of, like, efficiency at controlling the wave side of things, also comes with, like, a turn meter booster and an increased speed, which will enable the team to do a little bit more in the department of going faster to ramp up to fight against the boss, you know? And of course, Newt, the main reason why we are able to approach Fire Knight hard in general is pretty much because of him. He's our shining star. And the reason why is that his A1, when fully booked, is a 100% chance of being able to either provide turn meter reduction or, in this case, freeze, because the Fire Knight boss is not going to be able to lose TM through TM measures. So the freeze is it's the same concept in a sense, but, like, it's done in a way that allows basically the mechanic to still shine the way it is, which is he's resistant to turn meter reduction, you know, versus his counterpart, which is his normal version. Whereas freeze is now that new implementation of turn meter control, right? And his A1 is pretty much ideal for it. And that's not all. I mean, his A3, which is the his big enemy max HP, is going to allow us basically to chunk once we stabilize the turn meter of the boss, basically. So just so you guys are aware, these speeds are pretty high. I built this team specifically for stage 10, And one of the things I'm noticing when in terms of like stage 10 is my inconsistency of being able to manage the turn meter after cracking the shield open, as well as maybe getting the shield open a little bit faster. You'll notice that some of the bosses or some of the champions, excuse me, are running Phantom Touch, even though Phantom Touch scales off of like, you know, the champion's attack, which, you know, on a defensive character like Newt may not be the most valuable, but it does apply a on-hit proc, which reduces the overall shield total. And as you go up in the stages, you'll realize that like the shield for Fire Knight exponentially gets bigger. I think it goes up into the north of like 18, 20, 21-ish range. So you need to get a lot of hits just to get him available to take actual damage or to take actual debuffs before, you know, anything. So like you basically have to consume some turns just getting to the boss's actual, like getting through his actual defenses and then actually beating him up, right? So, with that being said, I built this team to kind of have some speeds with the mindset of being able to push into stage 10 and maybe effectively farm stage 10. I'm still tinkering with that to find some efficiency, and I think that like there are some things that I know for a fact that will enhance the efficiency. So Phantom Touch is one, as well as like maybe having our champions fully booked. That's one thing I am facing the reality of. But because of that inconsistency, I decided, like, you know, it'd be at least wise for me to at least consider farming at stage 6. So with that being said, let's get into the run and I'll explain how it goes as we go along, okay? So the main focus as to how our team is going to go is basically we're going to, you know, let them pretty much do what they want to do for the most part in the first wave, because like we don't need to worry about cooldowns until we get to the second wave. But the main thing that I'm looking for here is that we maintain control of the wave, because they hit. They may be a little bit more squishier in terms of the side of like taking damage, but in all actuality, they're trucks. They're like glass cannons. So freezing the enemy waves, which you saw Creoden do effectively here, was very, very key. Now you'll see that some of them will start losing their freezes over time, and then, you know, Nut as well as like Carl and a couple others, they'll cycle back into using some of their abilities, will eventually cause them to be refreezed. So this is a great way that we've been able to contain the enemy waves and control their output. To allow us to be able to kind of safely breathe into getting through this wave gradually. Now, the longest part about this entire run is going to be the waves, which is the unfortunate reality we have to face. Now, with that being said, though, you know, having Newt have his A2 open to provide not only decreased attack, but more importantly, the weaken, enables us to basically get a little more damage there. And then whenever Farakin does his A1, like for example, through the ally attack with Lanathro, he does get that decreased defense, and that enables us to basically be able to do just a little bit more damage and get us through there. But at all times of the fight, you know, we're in a minute and 14 seconds in, and we're not a single ad has been able to touch us, and that's the key thing that we're looking for, right? Now, moving into the second wave, it gets a little bit more cautious here, because we have to watch out for our cooldowns going into the boss fight itself. So the main thing you're going to notice is that one of the champions in this particular case is going to be your Carl, is going to be a little bit more withholding in terms of his kit, whereas Creoden is the main one that's kind of holding the wave down with his A2. The A2 is kind of like the big thing that gives us all the freeze AoE wise, right? Now, you do notice that the Venuses are getting unfrozen, and yet they're still attacking the frozen champion here. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind, and that's why those speeds that we have are allowing us to kind of cycle into our abilities a little bit quicker, along with the speed ramping that we're getting, with the turn meter reduction that we're getting from the A1. Like, it's basically synergizing up to a point where we're able to cycle into our kit really, really effectively, and boom, we freeze them again. And then now it's back to just, you know, keeping the status quo. We're putting damage to the champions that have the most likelihood to take damage, because decreased defense and weakens on the board. And you're seeing these guys kind of get back open, right? Well, you're seeing them right back into being frozen. And that's the great thing about the freeze comp team, is that they're able to maintain that level of freeze without too much of an issue. Now, fast forward into the part of the boss fight that we're going to be going to. We do have the AI set up, and I'll go back and show that here in a little bit, where the champions are all set to do something specific at the beginning. So pretty much the main thing that we're going to aim for here is making sure that the boss not only loses his shields, but we keep him from having a turn. That's what we're looking for, right? Now, when we're in this wave, you'll notice that, like, in particular, you're not seeing your Carl use his A2 in particular, which is the one that has the decreased speed. You're not seeing that. Maybe outside of the first opener of the wave fight, he may have used it, but outside of that, he doesn't use it anymore. And the reason why is we need to have it available going into stage 3. Whereas, like, his Glaciate, which is his A3 that does a lot of AoE and the freeze right there, he's not going to use that, and there's going to be a reason why, and I'll explain that later. Is a little bit more available, so we use that to kind of help fill this through, keeping control of the wave. Same thing with Creoden. Creoden's also using his A2, which is a freeze, but it's not going to be the main focus for the boss, because that's not going to be the biggest benefit. And allow me to explain. I'm gonna slow this down a little bit, but when you pay attention to how the AoEs are hit and how many hits we have to get through 18 stacks on stage 6, right? He only hits him 2 times with his A2, and we won't freeze him because he has his shield up, right? So he's going to open up with his A1, which is a 3-hitter. With Phantom Touch procs, may get us a couple more hits, which means we'll get to the shield faster. That's why PT's on the board. But you'll notice that because between the two of these, 45% chance and then 25% chance, the likelihood of him landing it within 2 hits is only going to be 45 each, where I'm banking on the chance of him being able to land it through the course of multiple hits a lot more likelier. Compared to, so like we're going for the multiple chances, even though it's a smaller percentage at base. And then of course he's gonna have his A3 up. We saved that throughout most of the wave too. I don't know if you were paying attention to that, right? So he is gonna open up with his A1. Oh, never mind. I actually messed it up real quick. Hold on. Let me see if we can fix this up here. They normally open up with their A1 here, right? With Newt open up with his A3, and the reason why is that he is going to need to cycle into his A1 a little bit more. His A2 is turned off for round 3, right? And then we have the ally attackers opening up with their ally attack, right? And it's practically down. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that I didn't, you know, A3 instead of A1 there, he basically would be fully open. Now, we have one full other ally attack, and that's going to be more than enough, I believe, to get us through to the wave, and you'll see the turn meter get reduced. It would probably be all the way at 0 if it wasn't for the fact that I A1 there. So that's basically all you have to kind of keep in mind when it comes to that, and that's why we open it that way, just to give us that extra breathing room. Mind you, we're dealing with champions who, you know, like for example, your car's not fully booked, so the likelihood of his landing his decreased speed or the freezes themselves is a little bit lower at the moment in terms of efficiency. So opening up with that A1 to open up the ally attack right off the rip is very, very important. But with that being said, we pretty much achieved what we needed to do. On his next turn after his opener, which was his A1, your Carl did land his freeze. That also had the decreased speed, so we needed to have that up. That's why we saved it from the last wave. We didn't use it, right? And then on top of that too, Newt didn't use his A3, so that we could cycle into using it at the beginning of this wave, which means that once the shields were broken down, after they got their turns, right? So you saw your Carl, Creodin, and Newt get their turns before, you know, the ally attacks went through. Now at this point, you're going to see pretty much them just maintain keeping the turn meter reduced, right? While we're cycling back into our abilities. Now, in terms of like going up into higher difficulties, he's faster, he has higher shield, so it gets a little bit harder to land, and that's why being faster and, you know, having more accuracy is going to be very, very important for this type of build. And I'm going to reiterate that enough as it is. Like, these are some pretty high speeds. I'm pretty sure you can tune this down tremendously and pull out more damage, for example. Like I said, I built this team comp conceptually. This is just concept here to show you guys what it would take to be able to not only take a team like this to successfully clear Fire Knight, but more importantly, to be able to, you know, clear, like, I like the safety net of it all. It's like, you know, I don't have any worries whenever, you know, Newt's going to go into his A3. I know for a fact that I'll have enough breathing room so that by the time I cycle back into Newt, if worst case scenario, they're getting resisted 3% all day long, he has a strong chance of just bringing it right back down. Like, for example, you see how we were kind of low? Newt went back in, and then turn meter's completely gone, right? And it's safe. Throughout the entire course of this fight, I have no stress in the world. The likelihood of this failing is much more likely on the wave side of things than it is the boss fight. And, you know, fighting the waves are actually a little bit more of the problematic side in terms of that, and then the RNG of just basically landing the freezes. That's the only two things that makes this particular dungeon a little bit more difficult to land. But you notice it, we're chucking right along. We got the decreased defense in there, and free. It's safe. Now, with that being said, some things I would like to express here in terms of like ways to improve the run. I think my fastest on this run was around like 3 to 4 minutes roughly, so about 3 minutes, right? The variation I'm going to show you guys is slightly faster, and I'll explain why later, but some key things I want to show you about this particular style of build, and I want to give also a disclaimer here too as well. I use this same comp, the triple freeze with 2 ally attacks. I used it to progress all the way through from beginning to end. So even with affinity weak elements, like for example, Creodin is a little bit less effective at stage 4, or on stage 3, Newt is a little bit less effective because of the weak hits potential. You know, negative affinity has its own caveats there. I was still able to use my team to progress through all stages of the game for Fire Knight using this one team, one exact same build. The only thing that may have improved is maybe I picked up a little more accuracy along the way. You know, we're getting some Grey Hall bonuses in terms of area effects and all that stuff like that. So one thing I wanted to point out is the priority of the positioning. So and normally how it goes is per, you know, lead roll 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Ally attackers, I have them up to the front so that they're the beginning of like the ally attacks. Whenever Lenathro sends it, Fat Man's going to be the first one running up, right? And then it's going to be followed in order, you know, in terms of position all the way up to where Newt is. So it'll go Fat Man, Yakarl, Creote, and Newt. And the way I have it this way is for a reason. One, the ally attackers aren't the important part about what happens after the shield is down, right? They're just there for the on-hit damage as well as to get, hey, send it. Let's go team. Let's go hit, right? But the freezers are on the backside, you know, basically the backside of the team to enable that whenever the shield does get broken down, any leftover residual damage that we do, or turns to on-hit procs, will cause maybe a chance for freeze, a chance for freeze, and a chance for freeze, right? And for me, because my Yakarl is not fully booked, I showed you guys before, his A1 is not fully booked, so he's missing out on 10% chances there, as well as, you know, any of his other abilities, they're not fully booked. I went for the least efficient to the most efficient freezer, basically, right? So, in order, my Yakarl being the least booked right now, I have him going first, so that if he does land something, great, but if we're still not going, we're not past the shield, his hits will be the thing that breaks the shield, and then Creoden and Newt would be the one that does the actual freezes, more likely, right? Newt being the next best, who is actually fully booked and fully mastered. Basically, there's nothing else I could do with him outside of getting blesses and maybe improving his gear. He has his stuff fully enabled, right? So, from a efficiency standpoint at landing the decrease or the decrease turn meter via freezes, Newt is the very best, which is why he's the last one to go. So, like, if all the shields are getting brought down by everybody else when he does his A1 hits, the chances of him getting those freezes to bring the turn meter down to allow us to cycle into our abilities to decrease speed, maybe a couple more freezes to enable the next rotation so that we keep him down. Newt is the best one, basically, right? And that's why this this positioning is very, very important. Now, I did use to run Newt in the lead role because of accuracy requirements. I think once you start getting towards the higher parts of the stage, you're looking around like basically north of like 345 speed accuracy, excuse me. And, you know, hitting those accuracies within high speeds and then trying to find complementary damage is very demanding, right? At least for my account, you know, I haven't gotten this progressed and I haven't had as much time to like invest into my resources as much as I would like to, right? For gear. So as a result of that, I have to work with what I got, you know, and I think that's something that's going to be applicable for all players. You got to work with what you got, right? Is there better? I think Longbeard, in terms of like options for ally attackers, would be better because he brings weaken to the table a little bit more effectively. In the boss fight, I have to slow down using the A2 because of the fact that he is, you know, we're kind of important for like reducing the turn meter. So like having that already built into someone like outside of ally attack, Lenathro doesn't do much. Maybe the shield's valuable, and that was kind of key for me in like little hiccup areas in terms of wave clear when it came to like the higher sides of stages. But if you notice during stages, I didn't have no issues whatsoever, right? But like that's pretty much one of the biggest changes I'd make. And then on top of that too, maybe instead of losing him, we add just another one. Once your Carl's fully booked, maybe he's more efficient at being able to land his freezes and kind of solo control the waves by himself in terms of like glaciate, right? And then maybe we can alleviate the need for Creoden, for example, right? Now, with that being said, the turn meter reduction in the higher stages might be a little bit of a concern. I don't have a third ally attacker to like test this theory, so unfortunately I have to work with what I got yet again. But this is like a great way to kind of get yourself into Fire Knight hard, as well as establish a baseline of being able to farm Submissive gear, you know what I mean? And that's the most important reason why you want to farm into Fire Knight hard, okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys something, and this is kind of something I'm a little proud of. If you're familiar with the IT team and the Clan Boss team that I utilized, it incorporated Helicaf at the same speeds, both for the IT team as well as the CB team, right? One key, Ultra Nightmare, Nightmare Territory, as well as 100% success rate on about 2 minutes and a half run, maybe a minute and a half, depending on like how efficient you are at basic landing. You know, some RNG elements kind of play a part. Maybe getting past threshold slows it down a little bit. You know what I mean? Like for the most part, it's a very, very effective IT team, very consistent. It works well, right? And it uses the same Helicaf. Well, the same Razovarg that I used in that CB team, I can also use here. Now, you notice there's one particular champion I'm missing. It's the same concept from the previous team, but with Creoden out and Razovarg in, and in particular, Razovarg in the lead. Now, I use PT, another benefit for Fire Knight, on Razovarg in terms of CB, right? It's the exact same CB Razovarg. With the bonuses from the area, he's going to be going at 270 speed. But it's the same concept. Basically, we run it down and we create a lot of opportunity for the ways, or not the ways, but the boss to get cooked as well as the ways are actually a little bit faster to kill. So like this team is actually faster than the one I showed you before, and the reason why is that Razavarg's output is so much more exponential, right? So I'm going to show you guys how it's going to go. Basically, the long and short of it is that you're really dependent upon either one or two factors, whether it's control from Creodin or your damage output being significant enough to a point where you're chunking the health of the wave. Like, basically, Razavarg his damage output is strong enough to a point where instead of having to rely on the control, just remove the factor altogether, right? And that's where the benefit of like maybe speeding up the run will be. Now, one thing I will note is that like with someone like Creodin, for example, versus a legendary, that's not really a fair factor in terms of like damage output, but in the long scheme of things, because of how I have them built, if I were able to squeeze in a more damage-oriented build without compromising the key elements that make this team effective, both teams would be a lot faster. So like trying to push 300 speeds has been very taxing on my account in terms of like multiple champions, and then while also doing that, trying to facilitate that 346 accuracy, it can be very demanding, right? But once my gear gets to a point where I'm able to even do that, Great Hall's another factor that would also contribute towards that. Once all that becomes a little bit more robust, being able to facilitate more damage into the kit will allow these waves to go faster, and that ultimately may bring a much more healthier experience, right? And for example, you notice how like two champions weren't done. This is the deficit of Glaciate not being fully booked, right? So like his efficiency is down. But even despite that, Razavarg is still doing so much damage to a point where these ads are getting just reduced tremendously. You know, I'm not focus targeting. I'm not doing anything that would inquire a little bit more, you know, like cleaning up this right here. We're going to take some damage, but thankfully with the way that the Venuses work, we don't have to worry about them doing enough damage to a point where it's a problem. And by the time we finish or they get close to the next round, because we have cleared everything else in the way, we can just prioritize that, which means that our efficiency becomes a lot more likelier. Now this gets cleaned up with Glaciate. This becomes a non-issue after you know fully being booked. I don't have the resources yet. This next CBC is coming up. I'm actually going to be prioritizing your Carl to see if maybe that'll have an impact on the Fire Knight 10 team that I'm working on, you know, with the previous one, including Creodin. And, you know, we're going to playtest and make that more robust, and then maybe I'll showcase it down the road with more efficiency, right? But you notice throughout most of the fight, outside of that small hiccup with Venus making it through to get a turn, it's pretty much free. Now, I opened up with Razavarg. He's a triple hitter. Any Phantom Touch that landed, he is a 5-star blessing, so he is practically getting one guaranteed Phantom Touch, right? Most of the time, right? Like this round he didn't, but like with the ally attacks, I'm pretty sure that we're going to get guaranteed another one, right? But he did open up with his A1, kind of similar to how Creodin would be, and this is where like the change off is super beneficial, right? So Creodin is a freezer with turn meter boosting and increased speed. Well, we get the increased speed from Razavarg. We don't get the turn meter reduction through the freezes, but because we're speeding up the team in terms of efficiency and damage output, it's kind of a non-issue. Once we get the shield down, everything kind of gets controlled. So that we have that luxury of being able to include him in there because our speeds are so good. Now, if you were aware of my previous team with Razavarg in CB, he's not at 300 plus speed, right? Like how most of the other ones are at. The thing is, though, is that with his increased speed passive, he's slowly ramping up to a point where he's permanently at, for the remainder of this stage, he is above that 300. So, like, he gets basically 5 speed for every increase he does. 5 by 5, 25, does that 2 times, he's got extra 50 points. So, 250 or higher, I think I have him around, like, 258-ish or something like that. He's already at 3.0 something, right? 3.08, and climbing, you know, he's gaining more. It caps after a certain point. But, basically, he's getting faster as the fights are going, and that's going to enable him to basically just be on the par with the speed. So basically having him at like a reasonable speed like 250 is a lot easier to do than 300. So the damage output that I'm getting from it is just exponentially better, right? But you'll notice that even a partially booked Yakarl and Newt are more than enough at stage 6 to kind of give us everything we were looking for in terms of that extra quality of life. Now we did get a little bit higher here, and that's the thing that I would note here is that like it was a little bit more turn meter because you are missing that Creodin factor, but it's still within a healthy range of like, all right, we're keeping him down. We're still able to give him that extra, you know, little bit of room to do his A3, right? And I definitely feel like this is what I chose going into the Fire Knight hard stages to give me that breathing room. Basically, no extra gear required. That same Razavarg you're using for that same Bunny Knight composition that we're using, right? I plugged and played them, and it looks just fine, right? And as a matter of fact, the reason why I have the 3 minute 15 turn, I believe, is because of this team, right here that you see. So it's very, very nice. Now, with that being said, I acknowledge that the speed requirements of this team are very demanding, right? Like I said, I went with the intention of bringing up this team to do a lot more than just stage 6. So, like, making it all the way to 10 was my goal, and maybe even being able to effectively farm 10. I end up hitting the roadblocks with, like, all right, maybe more Phantom Touch Blessing, more consistency would land me better opportunities. Or maybe it's the fact that, we don't have a lot of books. Maybe 346 was the bare minimum. I need a little bit more to give myself a little bit more. Like, I'm going through a process of elimination of clearing out some of those things, and I'll be able to give you guys much more vivid understanding of, like, what makes this team become robust in Fire Night 10. But at the very least, I can give the seal of approval on stage 6, and that's what I wanted to give you guys here. If you are struggling to do 300 plus speeds, which is what I was aiming for, I was basically aiming as close as I can to 300 with all my champions. If that becomes a problem, I think that like 260s, no less than 250 I would probably go for to start off, but like maybe 260s, 270s would be a little bit more okay. Like, I think that would be perfectly fine. If it gets to a point where even you have to compromise, like, for example, Newt, even though he's your best, you can go in and basically just turn this off and just let him be 100% turn meter, like kind of how you have your allure in the normal stages. You can have him kind of do something similar, as long as you can effectively do the run. And now, I want to say this before I let you guys go. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to give opinions. Oh, you can only farm it at 4 or 5 minutes. It's not worth it at that point. I will respectfully disagree with the key factor that is, if you're going for quality, right? It is always better for you to go for the highest stage you can go to versus doing normal, right? Stage 1 of hard is much better than going at stage 25 of normal. And the reason why is because you're open to the opportunity to be able to get mythic gear, which is an extra substat rule. Maybe you have extra stats, in general, right? And that could be the thing that makes or breaks your account getting to the next stage. Imagine getting that savage piece that gives you, that's a mythic piece that gives you an extra substat rule in red towards your speed. That could be the thing that changes your account. You know what I mean? Every little bit of gains you're doing, this is all about min-maxing, right? So eventually you'll get there. Don't get lost in the FOMO of all these other people who are constantly going out of their way to say, like, if I'm not able to do a 10-second run, it doesn't mean anything to me. Well, then fine, you farm normal. You're more than I'll, that's your game to play, right? But if you want to at least be able to touch the boss and be able to start getting some mythic gear and whatnot, this is more than a viable way to do so. So I want to encourage you guys that, like, if you don't succeed at your first attempts, look to optimize your efforts. The most key thing that I will say in terms of stats to look for, forget set bonuses and all the other stuff. The main thing you want to do is be able to effectively freeze the champions, and you're going to need good accuracy to do so. I aimed for the very tippy tops, which is why you'll see, like, in particular, Newt at 345, your Carl at 345. Farakin's a little bit struggling there, but, I'm trying to get him closer to 345, right? Razavard, 295, but if you use Razavard in your combo, remember, you got to increase accuracy, so maybe you can lean on that, right? And in tandem with the fact he's going to have increased speed. So, like, in all actuality, there's ways to kind of make up for your deficits in terms of, like, efficiency, right? If you're lacking in speed, you're lacking in accuracy, look for ways to complement that or make up for that, right? From a gearing standpoint or from an ability standpoint, Razavard enables that, right? And then on top of that, too, maybe Lenothro is only a one-hitter on his A1, but maybe with Phantom Touch that turns into a two-hitter, right? So, like, look to, like, find ways to complement your team to get through the main focus point. And then from there, efficiency will come, I think being able to farm the higher stages effectively, which means that, like, you're able to do it with low fail rate or basically 100% success rate is more important than the speed of it. Once you get through being able to effectively farm that, by the time you realize you'll be getting better gear, and then you can cycle that into your team, which ultimately improves the speed. And then, with that being said, you'll be able to improve other teams, which may improve your efficiency at getting other champions, which will be more meta. Like, maybe because I got better gear here, I'm able to farm my clan boss team's a little bit better, or something around those lines. Maybe, I was doing 2-key Ultra Nightmare. Now I'm able to 1-key because I was able to cycle some better gear into it. And that's the whole point about, like, pushing your progression in terms of getting higher quality gear, right? It's to make everything a little bit easier. And that's where that optimization side of that true endgame desire of, like, I want to speed farm this. Yeah, it'll come. It'll come. So I hope this message is well intended. It comes from a place of just doing your best, and don't be disparaged by other people's perspective of whether or not this is fast or not. Who cares? Are you able to 100% do it? Great. If not, let's look at tweaking it some more so that you can get there, okay? And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And also, I want to give a straight shout out to all of you members that are a part of the Sin of Nights as a part of this YouTube community. We are almost there to 500. I hope that we can hit there pretty soon, and I want to thank everybody that's doing it. So don't forget to subscribe. Give us some love if you don't mind. And with that being said, always remember, stay ascended.
Quick to got the